Hey guys, this is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm back here with our Benny's Bat section for today, Wednesday, August 5th. The idea of the Benny's Bat section is for us to go over all the pitchers that are on the mound today in MLB and figure out what their weaknesses are. And then what we like to do is look at the guys on the other team that are going up against them and try to figure out who profiles to have a good game against that pitcher's weakness. We're going to start today. There's a lot of rookies on the mound today, so it made the analysis a little bit tougher. Just as a teaching point for some of you guys, if you're looking to find out what a rookie has done and who he has struggled with, if it's somebody who maybe only has one start in the majors and you don't have a lot of major league stats to go on, you can go to milb.com. That's the minor league baseball website. And when you go to milb.com, it's just like going to mlb.com. You can call up the player's name, type it in a search box, it'll bring up that player. Definitely for the pitchers, you can go and you can look at the splits. You can see if they've been giving it up to righties or lefties. You can see if they give up a lot of home runs, what their batting average is, all the same stats that you can look at MLB.com. So milb.com is the name of that website. And for a day like today, it's definitely something that you should know because we have a lot of guys that are on the mound for their first or second starts. The reason I said that is the first guy we're going to talk about is Tyler Duffy. He's a rookie making his first start. He's up at Toronto today, which is not an easy place to make your first start. Left-handed bats hit 260 against him in AAA, but he didn't give up any home runs, and he did have a sub-3 ERA. If he didn't have such a tough matchup today, I would actually say he's probably somebody that you can look at. But remember, we've seen some rookies throw some really good starts so far to start the season. Definitely in their first and second looks, teams just don't know what this guy has, what kind of pitches he throws. And there's been a lot of guys who came out and have thrown some really good games in their first time in the majors. There's a couple bats in that Toronto's team that you got to be afraid of, and that's why I don't think this is a great matchup for him, even though he does have some pretty good numbers. You got Josh Donaldson, 373 WOBA, 248 ISO number. You also have Troy Tulowitzki, who just came over. You have Jose Bautista, 374 WOBA, 284 ISO number. So, those are going to be the 1, 2, and 3 hitters on the top of that Toronto order. And those are some pretty big bats. Those are definitely not guys that are, easy outs in the major league for any pitcher. Even veterans who, have won Cy Youngs and been around for a while. Excuse me. So I don't think this is the greatest spot for Duffy. I do think you can look at some of these Toronto bats. Toronto's been killing the ball, even against right-handed pitching. Obviously, against a lefty is, basically a slam dunk with this team. But even against right-handed pitching, I think there's still some guys that you can look at here. The next guys that we're going to look at is Steven Wright. Steven Wright goes up against the Yankees today for Boston. Left-handed bats have hit 257 against him, and right-handed bats have hit 242 with 8 home runs and 32 innings pitched. Mark Teixeira is the guy who stands out the most, probably one of my favorite first base options today. He's got a 419 WOBA with a 361 ISO number. So those are really, really good numbers that he has against right-handed pitching. He's been absolutely killing the ball. We like him when he's at home. And that left-handed swing is tailor-made for Yankee Stadium. So I think he's in a good spot today. Another guy we can look at is A-Rod. He's got a 373 WOBA and a 218 ISO, even though it's a righty-righty matchup. Again, Wright has given up a lot of home runs to right-handed bats already, so I do think this is a pretty solid spot for A-Rod as well. And the last guy we can look at is Brett Gardner. 368 WOBA, 173 ISO. He's the engine that's up on top of that order that makes them go. Between him and Ellsbury, who just came back. Ellsbury doesn't have great numbers, but you know what? He's such a good player that he's another guy that you could look at too. Another left-handed bat that you can throw up against Wright if you wanted to on top of that order. I think the Yankees are a pretty decent team that you can stack up today, and I think you're going to get a lot of runs out of that game between the Yankees and Boston. Next guy we can look at is another rookie, Matt Boyd. Boyd is making his second start in the majors. He got shelled in his first start. He gave up 5 home runs and only 6 innings pitched. There's not a ton of guys on that Kansas City team, though, that really profile well against them. You want to look for some right-handed bats. The one big right-handed bat they do have is Lorenzo Cain. 437 WOBA, 235 ISO number, so I think he's in a great spot today. Most sites he's actually priced up. I know on Fantasy Feud I thought his price was pretty nice. I think I put him in my roster this morning when I was making my rosters over there. On FanDuel and DraftKings, he's a little bit pricey for me. On Fantasy Aces, he's in a decent range. I wouldn't say he's overpriced, but I wouldn't exactly say he's cheap either. But he does have a good matchup, so I don't even mind paying up a little bit for him today. Next guy we can talk about is Dave Holmberg. Holmberg's another guy making his second start. He got roughed up in AAA this year. Left-handed bats were hitting 306 against him. Right-handed bats were hitting 299 against him with 12 homers and 82 innings pitched. With Matt Holliday being hurt, though, on that St. Louis team, the only two guys that I'm really looking at today are Johnny Peralta. He's got a 353 WOBA, but a huge 279 ISO against left-handed pitching. So for the shortstop position, if you're looking for a guy that has some home run power, I think Peralta might be the guy to look at today. They are in Cincinnati, which is an easier place to hit home runs than his home field in St. Louis. So I do think he's somebody that you can look at and should be a popular shortstop option on the day. The other guy to look at is the rookie, Randal Grichuk. Again, his price has come up on just about every site. So where he's expensive, I don't think he's worth it. But if you can get him cheap, and they do have him batting up, high in the order, he has been batting 8th when they face right-handed pitching, but he bats up 2nd lately when they face a left-hander, especially without Holliday when they're trying to get some more right-handed bats up towards the top of that order. So just see where he is when the order comes out today. If he's batting in the 8 hole, obviously that's a knock on him, although I do think he's in a good situation. But if he's a guy who's going to be batting 2nd today against a left-hander, which is his preferred split, I definitely think he's somebody that you can put in there. He does have a lot of home run power. He hits the ball real hard. And again, the kid's only 23 years old, so he's still coming into his own. But I think he's going to be a very good player down the road for that Cardinals team. Let's see. Next guy we can talk about is Williams Perez. Perez has allowed left-handed bats to hit 302 against him with 4 homers in 24 innings. So I definitely think you can look at a guy like Brandon Belt with his 371 WOBA, 218 ISO number. Also think a guy like Brandon Crawford makes for a decent shortstop play. His price has come up because he's been hitting the ball really well lately. So I don't know if he's close in price to a guy like Johnny Peralta. I think I'd rather spend up the extra couple $100 depending on what site you're on for Peralta. But I do think that Crawford doesn't make a bad substitute if you can't afford to get up to Johnny Peralta today. You also got all the other right-handed bats who I think are in a decent spot against Perez too. Panic 360, 141 against righties. Posey 393, 180 against righties. Pence is 380, 223 against righties, so he does have that home run power. Duffy 376, 165 against righties. So as you can see, there's a lot of bats on the San Francisco team that make a lot of sense to stack up and use today. And I think any of those 6 guys that we just mentioned are guys who could be in play. Let's see. The Yankees are pitching rookie Luis Severino today. This guy has dominated AAA. He's a Dominican-born pitcher. He has basically a 200 batting average to both sides of the plate. I think his ERA right now is below 3. He has just been absolutely lights out. He is a right-handed pitcher, so the 2 guys that you can look at on the Red Sox are David Ortiz, 392 WOBA, 269 ISO number. Again, left-handed bats in Yankee Stadium are always in play, so even though the Severino kid is supposed to be a stud, I'm excited as a Yankee fan to see what he can do. I'm also a realist. I also know that there are some big left-handed bats on that Red Sox team, that you got to look out for. Another guy I would keep an eye on is Alejandro De Aza. Basically, they moved him up to the 2 hole, which I've been saying they should do for a while now. He has a 391 WOBA with a 194 ISO number. Whenever they face a right-handed pitcher, this guy's one of the best bats they have from the left side. And for a while, he's been a very good hitter against right-handed pitching. He has some really sneaky good splits over the years. The problem is he really struggles when he goes up against a left-hander. So he's basically a platoon-type player. But when you do have the right splits for him, he's definitely somebody you can roll out there because his numbers are, well above average against, in the righty-lefty matchup like he has today. Next guy we could talk about is David Phelps. Phelps has allowed about a 260 batting average to both sides of the plate, only 8 home runs in 105 innings. So he hasn't been great, but he also hasn't been horrible. So he's not somebody that I'm looking to target as a pitcher on the mound, but he's also not somebody I want to take a ton of bats against. One guy who's really standing out on the numbers this year is Curtis Granderson. As a left-handed bat against right-handed pitching, he's got a 385 WOBA with a 218 ISO number, and he always flies under the radar. People don't really think about him all that much. But again, those are some really, really good numbers. And he plays his home games in Citi Field, which is a really tough park to hit in. So you got to think that those numbers would even be better if you played in a better ballpark, if you played half his games in a better ballpark. You also have Travis dArnaud, who's back from injury. He's got a 375 WOBA with a 253 ISO against right-handed pitching. So he's somebody else you can look at. And the last guy you have to consider is Lucas Duda. It has nothing to do with his numbers. It has to do with the fact that he's starting to swing the bat better. He's got 9 home runs in his last 9 games. 3 of those games have been multi-homer games. So, I mean, with that kind of upside, this is a guy who's in play. Definitely for tournaments. I don't know if I love him for cash. Miami's not an easy place to jack home runs out of, so I don't really consider him to be, a top home run option on the day. But I do think that he could be someone that would hit one, and I wouldn't be surprised about it. Next guy we have is Nick Martinez. This is somebody who we should be targeting against. Right-handed bats are hitting .309 against Martinez with 9 home runs and 55 innings pitched. So there's a couple guys on that Houston team that you can consider. Hank Conger's been killing right-handed pitching, 497 WOBA, 390 ISO. Obviously limited at bats. I think he only has about 60 or 70 qualifying at bats. But again, he's been so good. He had the double Don game the other day. And I know that Castro caught last night, so there's a good chance Conger could be in there today as the catcher. You got Preston Tucker, who has been smashing right-handed pitching all season, 391, 268. Even though Martinez is more of a reverse splits kind of guy, I still think Tucker's in a pretty good matchup today. And being that he is a reverse splits kind of guy, I think you can look at Carlos Correa, 370 WOBA, 256 ISO number. So he's a guy that has home run power from the shortstop position, something that's very hard to find. If you can afford to pay up for him, I think he's probably one of the top options on the day. But again, I think you can get a guy like Peralta who has, almost as good a matchup at a much cheaper price. So I think that would be the way that I would really like to go if I had to. But again, I'm not going to argue with anybody who finds a way to get Correa in their rosters. This guy's been absolutely amazing lately. If you're looking at right-handed bats to attack Nick Martinez, you can also look at a guy like Altuve, or even a guy like Gomez who just came over. They're going to be the 1 and 2 batters most likely in that order, hitting in front of guys like Correa and Tucker. And I think if you want to put some of those guys in your order, there's a good chance that they could have a pretty good game because Nick Martinez is very bad, the right-handed pitching. Texas is a really good hitter's park. And with the weather being the way it is, the balls are absolutely flying out of there lately. Next guy we can talk about is Drew Hutchinson. Hutchinson's allowed right-handed bats to hit .329 with 7 home runs in 52 innings. The one guy that I really want to target on that Twins team is Miguel Sanu, 468 WOBA with a 327 ISO number. He's the guy that stands out the most based on the numbers. If you got money to spend at second base, Brian Dozier's 265 ISO score, one of the highest ones you're going to see for a second baseman. His WOBA is not that great, though. I think it's only in the 350 range. So it's just a tad below what we usually like to look at. But again, the ISO number that he has is huge. So in a tournament, if you can afford him, he's definitely somebody that has that home run upside that can help get you over the top. You could also look at a guy like Aaron Hicks, who's been pretty hot lately. But again, any of these right-handed bats are going to be in play. Minnesota's playing up in Toronto, really good hitter's park. So, you could even look at guys like Torrey Hunter or Trevor Plouffe if you wanted to. I think, actually, Plouffe is probably not going to be in the lineup today. But, you look at a guy like Torrey Hunter. I mean, I think that there's, some merit into looking at a lot of these bats. Hutchinson has been better at home. But again, 329 is a pretty high batting average against right-handed bats that he's allowed. So it's not like he's having a great season so far. Let's see. Next guy we can talk about is Aaron Harang. Philly's going up against Atlanta today. Left-handed bats are hitting .275 against Harang with 6 home runs and 47 innings pitched. Now, here's the problem that I have with this game. Who do you want to take on Atlanta with Freddie Freeman being out? Do you want Nick Markakis, who just hit his 2nd home run of the season the other day? Do you want a guy like Jace Peterson, who does have a little bit of home run power in the second base position, but has a horrible batting average? I mean, yesterday, A.J. Przinsky was the 3-hole hitter for this Atlanta Braves team. So that should tell you right away that, this is not a great upside offense. The problem that I have, though, is, it's almost like the irresistible force and the immovable object here. Harang has been pretty bad on the mound, but Atlanta has been really bad with the bat. So you got to figure something's got to give. Either Harang's going to go out there and throw a no-hitter because this Atlanta team is that bad, their lineup, or this Atlanta lineup is still going to be able to pound out 8 or 9 runs because Harang is that bad. And that's the tough part about this matchup is I don't know which way to go with it, and I could see either one of those scenarios playing itself out. So, take it for what you will and, try to figure out how you want to attack this game. Next guy we can talk about is Jeff Locke going up against the Chicago Cubs. Locke has allowed right-handed bats to hit .275, but hasn't given up many home runs this year. I think that also has something to do with the fact that he plays his home games in Pittsburgh as well. But that's basically the way you want to go about him. Left-handed bats have hit 253 against him too, so it's not like guys from the other side of the plate aren't hitting well either. Anthony Rizzo is somebody who's very good in a lefty-lefty matchup. He's got a 442 WOBA with a 196 ISO. So those are some pretty huge numbers, especially for a guy in a same-handed split. Had a big day yesterday. I think he was 3 for 4 in another lefty-lefty matchup. So I definitely think he's somebody that you can consider. Let's see. That's basically it. I mean, you can look at a guy like Chris Bryant, but he went out with an injury the other day. So I don't expect him to be in the lineup again today either. You know, if you want to go down to some of those right-handed bats like a Starlin Castro or something like that, you know, maybe a Chris D'Onofrio batting up second or third in the order, I think those guys are okay, but it's not anybody who I'm going to go out of my way to make sure I have in my lineup. Next guy we can talk about is Brett Anderson. Anderson is going up against Philly today. Left-handed bats are hitting 283 against them. Right-handed bats are hitting 267 with 9 home runs and 81 innings pitched. A couple guys that you want to look at. You got guys like Darren Ruff with a 450 WOBA and a 211 ISO number. A guy like Cesar Hernandez, 382. Again, like Cesar Hernandez, I say all the time, if this guy is cheap on whatever site you're playing, which is mostly DraftKings who refuses to raise his price. I mean, yesterday he had a single, a double, a walk, and a run scored. That might not sound like a lot, but when you add that all up, that's 5 plus 3 plus 2 plus another 2. You know, he had 12 or 13 points for you yesterday, and he cost you only around $3,000. So you basically got 4 parts of cost for using on DraftKings, so you can fit him in either spot. So it works out about as well as it possibly could for you, to be honest. Also, Mikhail Franco hit the huge grand slam yesterday. 344 WOBA, 207 ISO number. He's probably on that team, and you know, hits right in the middle of the order. So he's been driving in a lot of runs lately. Remember, Philly's been absolutely on fire. I think they won about 12 or 14 since the All-Star break, and you know, they're doing it by putting up runs. They put up 7, 8, 9, 12 runs, you know, 5 or 6 times over the course of the last couple of weeks. So this offense is starting to click, and they're starting to look a lot better. Next guy we can talk about is Dan Haren. Now, remember, Dan Haren got traded to the Chicago Cubs. So Haren's going up against Pittsburgh today for the Chicago Cubs. Left-handed bats are hitting 276 against him with 14 home runs and 56 innings pitched. So the only guy who profiles well against right-handed pitching on that Pittsburgh team is Andrew McCutchen with his 379 WOBA and his 212 ISO score. But with Haren being so bad against left-handed bats, I think you can also look at guys like Gregory Polanco, maybe even a Neil Walker as a cheap second base option. I think these are guys that you want to try to get into your order, basically because Haren has been that bad against left-handed bats. Let's see. We got Rubby De La Rosa. Speaking of guys that are bad against left-handed bats, he's given up a He's given up a 311 average with 17 home runs and 60 innings pitched. So I think that the guy you really, really have to look at on that Washington team, the one guy who stands out more than anybody else, is Bryce Harper from the left side. Harper has a 475 WOBA, 358 ISO number against right-handed pitching. And when you have a guy like De La Rosa, who's basically given up a home run a little bit more than one every 3 innings, it really doesn't make sense not to use a guy like Harper today. I think Harper's probably one of the top options if you have to pay up for him, which I know you do on every site. He's one of the top 3 most expensive outfielders. I know he's in the top 3 on Feud and DraftKings today because I made my rosters over there already. I haven't looked at Aces or FanDuel yet, but I'm assuming he's probably one of the top options there. He's usually one of the top 2 or 3 options on Aces, along with a guy like Mike Trout. On FanDuel, it varies. They have some guys up there sometimes, but he's always in the top 5. And I think that today is a good day for him. It's a great matchup for him. You know, I mean, you really can't say anymore. This is probably one of those times where you wouldn't mind paying up for a guy like Harper. Next guy we can look at is Ian Kennedy. Kennedy has allowed 23 home runs already this year in 103 innings pitched. So guys have been taking him yard, you know, almost once, you know, better than once every 5 innings. Right-handed bats have been doing a lot of the damage with a 281 batting average. So there's 2 guys that really stand out to me on that Milwaukee team. I think you can look at a guy like Adam Lind. Even though he's been a little banged up, he smashes right-handed pitching. 384 WOBA, 229 ISO score. And the other guy is Ryan Braun. Even though his WOBA is a little low at 348, he does have a 212 ISO score. And with the way that Kennedy has struggled giving up home runs, I definitely think that he's somebody else that you could have in play today. Let's see. Next guy we can talk about is Gio Gonzalez. Right-handed bats are hitting 278 against him with a whip of 1.53. So far, Paul Goldschmidt is 0 for the month of August. I think he's 0 for 15 so far in the month of August. But his 471 WOBA and his 313 ISO are two of the higher numbers you're going to see today. Excuse me. If you're playing on a site where this guy has been discounted because he's in a little bit of a slump, today would be a great day to roll him out there because he absolutely kills left-handed pitching. So I do think that he's one of those guys that I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on. AJ Pollock is another guy you can look at. 367 WOBA, 184 ISO. To me, he's just a little bit too expensive on most of these sites. He doesn't have the huge home run upside, so I don't really see the need to pay up for him. But again, I think he is somebody that's in a good spot because he does hit left-handed pitching well, and Gio has been struggling with solid right-handed bats this year. Let's see. You can look at a guy like Taylor Youngman. I think Youngman's in a great spot. I mean, he's been basically a stud so far this year. He's going up against San Diego. San Diego has one of the highest strikeout rates in the league against right-handed pitching, one of the lowest batting averages in the league against right-handers. So he should be able to get a lot of strikeouts, which will give him a nice floor. He's favored to get the win, which will be nice. And he's also somebody who shouldn't give up a ton of hits, so there shouldn't be too many of those negative events that we try to avoid. Again, Youngman's been pretty good. If you look at his numbers over his last few starts, he's been pretty solid. So I definitely think that he's somebody I'm not going to look to take too many bats against. If you're going to go for anybody, the one guy who kind of profiles well against right-handed pitching is Justin Upton. But even then, he's only got a 357 WOBA, so a little below what we look for. The 218 ISO number is pretty nice, though. He does have a lot of home run power against a right-hander. And that game isn't in San Diego, it's in Milwaukee, so it's a much better hitter's park. So I think Upton could be the one guy that would be sneaky. But again, I really like Youngman. He's somebody I'm not going to be targeting bets against and might even have on a couple of my rosters. You got a guy like Carlos Martinez, another guy who's been really good lately. Left-handed bats have done the most damage against him with a 248 average, 8 home runs and 60 innings pitched. So you can look at a guy like Joey Votto on the other side. He's the one guy on that Cincinnati team that I think I wouldn't mind taking against Martinez. He's got a 417 WOBA, 245 ISO number, left-handed bat going up against a right-handed pitcher. So he's the guy who's probably in the best spot of anybody there. Game is in Cincinnati, pretty good hitter's park, better than being in St. Louis. Martinez has struggled a little more on the road. So all these things are positive signs for a guy like Votto. A guy like Votto. But I don't know. I mean, I think I still like Mark Teixeira a little more, but I'm not going to argue with anybody who tries to put them both in a lineup if they're playing over on, a site like Fantasy Feud or a site like Aces that has a utility position. If you can fit them both in your lineup, I don't think that's the worst idea today either. That pretty much sums it up for guys we're looking to target. I mean, you got Scott Kazmir for Houston going up against Texas. Texas struggles with left-handed pitching. Kazmir's been tough on left-handed bats. I see this as being a really tough matchup for them. You got Johnny Cueto against Detroit. You could probably look at a guy like J.D. Martinez in that one. 390 WOBA, 284 ISO. But again, Cueto's a pretty solid pitcher, not somebody I'm looking to take a lot of bats against. I don't want anybody on the Marlins going up against Matt Harvey. Even though he's not at home, Miami's a good pitcher's park too, so you don't really want to mess around with that. You got Bumgarner going up against Atlanta. Again, Bumgarner had a little bit of a rocky start last time out, but there aren't a lot of bats that you really want to, try to target against him. I think I actually messed something up now that I'm looking at it. I had 2 people down here going up against Atlanta, so I'll get something in the forum over there. I must have messed something up. I think I skipped over the Dodgers game today. But I'll let you guys know in the forum post what I like on that one. But that basically wraps it up today for our section of Benny's Bats. I thank you guys for joining us over here at RotoCurve. And as always, stay classy, DFS.